Wow, I must say, what a breathtaking audience we have here today. Looking across the room, I can feel the power of diversity present. We have a colorful bunch and a well-balanced representation of both genders. And genders is a good topic. Did you know that globally, 65% of product management roles are held by people that identify as male, whereas 35% are held by people that identify as female? What does this mean to us? This means that there's a lot of room for us to continue to drive and empower diversity. Because as we all know, diversity drives innovation and cultivates an inclusive work environment. So as we're here today, we have the power to continue to drive and promote diversity, equity, and inclusion, regardless of how big or minimal the act. And minimal is a good word here as well, because we're here to talk about the perfectionist trap. Why do we hesitate to deploy a minimal viable product? Before I jump into the details, let me introduce myself. My name is Angelique Mesh, and I'm half Latina from Central America, Honduras, and half German. Currently, I reside in Hanover, Germany, and in 2013, I obtained my degree in industrial engineering from the Technical University of Clausthal. Throughout the course of the 9 years in my career, I've held two key roles, one being a field engineer and the second one being a product manager. I started off as a field engineer working on offshore drilling facilities, actually here in Aberdeen, and then I moved into the non-destructive testing industry. Here, I was able to work with different industries in the automotive industry, in the metal industry, renewables industry, and aviation industry, as well as the electronics industry. After one night shift that was supposed to end at 6 a.m., and it ended at 6 p.m., and I had to move the system from the middle of the railways all the way to the front, I was covered from top to bottom in oil. My pants were ripped. I was tired. I said, okay, enough of being a field engineer. So I called my manager and I said, I would like a more office-based role now. I've learned the lessons that I need to learn. And that's when I went into the office and I started off as a global sales manager, then moved into global program management, and then ultimately I became a product manager. When I got the role as a product manager, the leadership gave me two products to develop, one being an asset performance monitoring solution, and the other one a data archival and data management solution. So I'm quite versed with data analytics, machine learning, IoT, building cloud platforms, and also big data management. We'll talk more about that throughout the course of my presentation. But that's a little bit about myself. Moving on, what can you expect of today's presentation? Since we're going to talk about what I like to call MXPs, minimal viable product, minimal lovable product, minimal marketable product, it's important for us to get into the mindset. What is minimal? Let's lose the fear of it. Let's get into that minimalistic mindset. So we'll talk about that concept, and then we'll move on to the concept of the MXPs, like I like to call them, and then ultimately, we'll discuss the beautiful challenges that we encounter throughout these MXPs. And finally, I would like to give you some literature recommendation that has helped me throughout my career. Let's get started. So, what do we feel, or what comes to our mind when we hear the word minimal? Anything that's small in quality and degree. The words that pop to our mind are incomplete, dissatisfying, and not enough, because it's minimal, right? And associated to that comes a certain emotion, anxiety, fear, feeling of inadequacy, right? Just picture you're going down the road to buy a car. You're not able to afford the big blown-up car. You buy the minimal version of it. So you feel inadequate. So naturally, human beings, we long for more. More is better. We like things that are complex, bloated, excessive, cluttered, and abstract, because it gives us everything and more than what we need. Just look at our phones. I barely use 10% of what my smartphone is equipped to give me. So what if we would change the way we feel about minimalism and feel the same way we feel about more is better. More gives us the sense of achievement, of proudness, of success. So what if we would take that feeling and translate it over to less is more? All of a sudden, something that's complex becomes simple. All of a sudden, something that's bloated is elegant in design. Something that's excessive becomes essential, tailored, focused. Something cluttered becomes decluttered, gives you room for creativity, space for your thoughts. Something abstract becomes focused and really addresses your need, is really tailored to you and the problem that you wanted to solve. So how can we get into this mindset, create the mindset shift from more is better to less is more? Well, you see here are 4 steps that have helped me throughout my career. Obviously, there's a lot more, but these 4 are quite essential and have really guided me through time. The first step is we need a mindset shift, right? So when we get a problem or when we get a task from leadership, they say build a product to do whatever, right? So what they give you is the solution. They say, build me the product. The product is the solution. But what you should ask yourself is, what is the problem that I'm trying to solve? What is the it that I'm trying to address? And that's where your mindset shift comes in, right? When you get the product, when you get the task, don't look at the product, at the solution first. Ask yourself, what is the problem? What is the it? And then address it. So that's the mindset shift, right? What is the problem? What is the it? Then we move on to step number 2, setting priorities. Naturally, as product managers or engineers, we fall in love with the solution we're building. So setting the priorities according to the it, the problem that we're trying to solve, and being focused is important because these milestones will keep us sane throughout the development process, throughout the release process, right? So setting the priorities according to the it, the problem, is very important because that's going to be your guideline. Then the next step, which is a bit harder, is habitual change. Change the way you make decisions, change the way you approach problems, change the way you operate, right? What does this mean? Create a new ceremony on how you groom features. Challenge your engineers, challenge your product owner. Hey, this is a user story. Why does it have 30 points? Can you break it down for me so I can really see the activities? And maybe in those 30 points, there's an activity that's 20 points, and you can say, hey, let's break that down further. Do we really need that? So really change your habits, challenge other people, and challenge the status quo. And then ultimately, the most hardest one is cultural change, right? What does this mean? When you're in this minimalistic mindset, when you're in that agile journey, you're going to encounter a lot of problems in terms of governance, a lot of problems in terms of your leadership, because they want you to release 6 products or 6 incremental products, but then they get scared because you don't have that fail-fast culture, right? So cultural change is hard to come. And you need to identify what you need to do to take your stakeholders with you. And as we have been talking before, it's an emotional journey, right? Because change and minimalistic bring a sense of anxiety with you. So you need to be able to take that fear away of your stakeholders, create trust, and really understand how you can change their mindsets and get them on board. So these 4 steps have helped me, and ultimately, you're the architect of your minimalistic structure. Okay, that was a lot of information. So how have these 4 steps helped me in the development of my product? Like I said before, I got the task to create a product from the ideation phase to the successful market implementation. The task that I got was create an asset performance monitoring solution on a system level and release it by the end of the year and get X amount of revenue in. I was like, you're right. I don't have the right data structure in place. I don't have the knowledge base from the people, the experience. We don't have a history on these systems. Nobody can tell me what the problem or what the most common problems are. So I said, let me get a mindset shift here. What is the problem that I'm trying to solve? And then I thought, okay, the problem is our customers have downtime. So they want to reduce the downtime. Our customers have high cost of ownership. They want to reduce the cost that they spend for spare parts, the lead times that they have. So downtime, cost of ownership, and maintenance interventions. Those are the problems that I'm trying to address. So that was my mindset shift, right? And then the next step, setting priorities. I was like, okay, The solution is the asset performance monitoring system, right? But how do I get there? And how do I get there quick? First, I said, this is a system. It consists out of different components. What if I would just focus on one component and understand, but for that I need to understand which component is most crucial for my customer. So I created a survey internally to my stakeholders, the service engineers and the remote support engineers, because they were the ones that were getting all the issues in from the customers. And I also identified 10 alpha customers that I know are, customers that are willing to give feedback and are good in trial and error, and I surveyed them. Ultimately, I found the one component that was most crucial, and that's what I focused on. So that was setting my priorities. And then habitual change. I was like, okay, normally we would release this and we would have everything full with cybersecurity and whatever else, the full tech stack, but I need to take a step back because the task was, number one, enable your customers to log in and look at their dashboards and then drive results-oriented dashboards so that they can see and monitor their asset, right? And I was like, I can't do that because I don't have the license. Corporate only allows me to upload the data, but I would have to get my own license if I want the customers to go on board. Okay, so what am I gonna do? I'm gonna give them a report. Because if they can't log on to the dashboards, I can still pull a report, and that way they can still see their dashboards, their results-oriented dashboards, but they don't have to log in, and that gives me time to get the license and get the whole process going. Okay, so report it was. Secondly, I was like, I have the data, but I don't have enough data to do predictive analytics. So what do I do now? Well, I'll stick with descriptive analytics. I'll take the physics-based models and the thresholds and also talk to people to see how we can set the thresholds from experience and use that. But how do I get the analytics part in? Well, you know what? I have humans. So when we download the report, I'll have the remote support engineer look over it, try and correlate the data, and then really give the customer an outlook of what's going to happen with his system. And what I'll do with that is I'll be able to learn from the customer. First of all, is our prediction right? And secondly, are we going in the right direction? And that's what I did. I changed the way I approached the problem. I changed the way, the framework that was given to me and used what I had to create a minimal viable product. And then ultimately, cultural change was, how do I create confidence that releasing a minimal viable product is still a high quality? And I don't have to go through all these release processes that we have. So I really had to fight for this one because we didn't have an incremental release process. So I really had to change the way program management managed the programs and the way we did release processes, so to speak. So that was the cultural change that I created there. Ultimately, this cycle looks very linear, but it's a very iterative process when you're releasing a minimal viable product because you release it to your alpha customers, you get their feedback in, and then you adapt and modify in iterations until you're able to have a product that's the minimal marketable product. You have the feature sets that you know your customers are willing to pay money for, right? And then you release it to market. That's your minimal marketable product. And from there on comes the last hurdle, which is the minimal lovable product, right? A lovable product, what it does is it connects your consumer, your customer emotionally to the product. They need it, they feel attracted to the product, and they're really emotionally connected to that product. And that's a big challenge. So this is the process, and it's quite iterative. What are the challenges we encounter with minimal viable product? I already touched on some of them. But from my experience, one of the things we had on the technology side was choosing the right tech stack, right? Right from the get-go, even if you're developing a minimal viable product, it's important that you have scalability in mind, right? You still focus on the bare bones, but you need to understand that when you develop your product, it still has to be scalable so that you don't invest double the time. And that was a mistake I made. I created the whole UI on React, and I had to go to Angular because we were going to integrate into a platform that used Angular. So I lost 7 months of development because I didn't keep that, I didn't have that in mind, for example. Another one is really understand your customer base. Do they want an on-prem solution, a cloud solution, or a hybrid solution? We developed automatic defect recognition solution on cloud, but our customer base was in automotive and they wanted to use it in line with their production system. So developing a cloud solution was completely off, right? So we had to scrap it and develop a headless platform on-prem. Right? So that's also quite important. Then moving on, we're talking about perfectionism, right? Identifying the wants versus the needs, really focusing on those bare bones and really focusing on the priorities you set to get there is very important here so that you don't start adding fluff to your product and you can get it quick to market. And then at the end of the day, we don't work in silos. We work in cooperations with other business units, with other engineering groups. And you might work according to the agile methodology, they might work according to waterfall. And they develop hardware, you software. How do you get a release process in place where both of you, where you can either release your product independently from the hardware or you release at the same time? So figuring out that working rhythm and governance is very important. And like we said as well, the cultural change. Driving cultural change is very important in an organization when you're developing MVPs, when you're working according to Agile, because this causes a lot of anxiety to people. And sometimes we also need to keep in mind the industry that we work in. So maybe if we're in a high regulated industry, working according to Agile and developing MVPs might not be adequate because you have a lot of regulations you need to comply with, right? So that's also important to understand what industry did I work in, what are the frameworks that I need to adhere to. So these are some of the challenges that I encountered with the MVPs. Then releasing your product to market, the minimal marketable product. The first thing here is, how do I quantify adoption? How do I know how many users, unique users are actually using my product, and are they using it reoccurrently, right? So when you release a product to market, and one of the ladies talked about this, you need to create measurable assumptions. Assumptions that you can then validate once you get the data in, so that you can really identify, is my product going in the direction I want it to go? Because here, it's very crucial that you make a go or no-go decision, right? We fall in love with the product, but we need to fall in love with the problem we're solving. And if we're not solving that problem, we need to pull the plug, right? The fast works mentality, fail fast, learn quick. How this worked for me was when I released the asset performance monitoring solution, we had a business model in place where, within the first year, we're going to get X amount of revenue and a high margin and whatever else. But what we seen was actually that the sales managers were asking for discounts quite a lot, right? So I had to go back and review the business model, and I had to go and have a tough conversation with my leadership, and I said, listen, I am not going to get the margins that you're looking for, and I'm not going to get that sales forecast in that you're looking for. So we need to have a heart-to-heart here. And ultimately, after 2.5 years, I was going to get the margins in. And we decided to keep the product because it was a strategic important for the market, and it also enabled new business models, pay-per-use, for example. But it's important that you're open about it and that you communicate this to leadership so that you can manage expectations, and you're not the product manager stuck with a product that's not selling, right? So make the tough decision, create assumptions, and make them measurable. Then ultimately, you go to the minimal lovable product. And this one is a bit complicated for myself as well, to be honest, because you need to touch the basic instincts of the humans so that so that we are attracted to that product emotionally. Just look at what Apple did with the phone, right? They created a need that was not there before. I didn't think I needed the internet all the time with me until, Steve Jobs said, hey, use it. Or Netflix, and so on. So how do you call on that instinct of your user that you really attract them and tie them emotionally to your product? But another valid question here is, do you even need to create a minimal lovable product? So depending on the industry, B2B, B2C, you might not need to go here, but that's a decision that you have to make then. So ultimately, if there's 3 things that I'd like you to take away from this talk is, first off, get into the headspace of being minimalistic. Really focus on the problem that you want to solve, and not on the end solution that you're trying to develop. When you're developing a minimal viable product, don't fall into the perfectionist trap. Release as quick as possible, test it out, because your users are not paying any money for it. So they're alpha users, they're going to give you feedback, and you'll see how you'll be astonished about your conversion rate from alpha to actually paying customers. Mine was 65%, I was quite happy about that. And then the third one is, when you release a minimal marketable product, Don't be afraid to make the tough choice and say, no, this product is not going in the direction we want to go. We need to do something else or kill it. And the literature that has helped me throughout my career, one is called Digital Innovation Playbook. That has helped me take really products from the ideation phase to the successful market implementation. It has a great canvas that you can use in workshops, like a 3-day workshop to really derive the idea, the use cases, the pain points that you're addressing, so I can recommend that. Secondly, as professionals, we deal with many different people, senior leaders, executives, and so on. So it's important that we know how do we bring our point across and how do we address issues in a productive manner. So Crucial Conversations, Tools for Talking When Stakes Are High is a very good book for that. And then ultimately Crossing the Chasm, which takes you to the different stages of the product. Thank you.
Wow, no, actually, thank you. Jump into Slido, throw some questions in there. Wow, I love what you talked about with an MVP or totally minimal product, having the human, having a team member do the predictions instead of building the prediction engine and hoping it's right. That's such a, like we talked about Skunkworks, that's such a Skunkworks approach to that, but I love that you used it for data collection to see, like, are we predicting the right things? That's so interesting to me, such a great idea.
And that brought a lot of anxiety in the engineering team, let me tell you that.
Because they were actually interfacing with the users, or?
Because they didn't think that, and that's the thing that engineering teams can be very proud. So when I said the remote support and field engineers are going to do this, they're like, oh, but they don't have the knowledge. They don't understand the physics-based models. They don't have to, right? They're doing the job. They know how to correlate the data. So.
Yeah, that's so. You mentioned keeping the fluff out of product. Fluff becomes that rickety infrastructure later on that you're like, why did we do this? And also talking about quantifiable assumptions instead of qualitative. It's not the CEO's gut on it. It's like, that is such a brilliant point. If you don't have those assumptions, can you really release?
And is your product going to be a success? So how do you know if your product is a real success, right? Yeah.
So, questions from the audience. Any tips on how to bring cultural change and increase adoption of minimalistic mindsets, especially in the C-suite?
That's a tough one. So, honestly, is developing rituals, right? Like we said, I think a speaker mentioned that before. Developing a ritual where you invite the C-suite leaders and say, look, this is what we're doing with the product. Demo your product. That really, really helps if you demo your product. Not many people do that, and I find it very astonishing. Demo your product and showcase it to them. Not the entire thing, but the basics of it. And then keep them in the loop and informed, and also have one-on-one conversations, right? That really helped me a lot. Going about one-on-one with each one and trying to understand, hey, what's your fear? What do you need to feel confident in this endeavor? And we underestimate one-on-one conversations with different people. That really helps because you're taking away the fear and you're creating confidence and trust in yourself as a person, but also in the product and your endeavor.
Amazing. So, kind of along the same lines, how do you get your stakeholders to agree, on what the the MLP is? Like minimum lovable product, how do you get people to agree on that?
So I think you can take this to the MVP and the MMP, right? So one of the things that we did was, because we had a huge stakeholder base, and as you know, everybody wants something different, I actually created a grooming session where I invited all of my stakeholders. I showed them all the features, and it was a very painful session at the very beginning because we went through every single feature, and I said, listen, give me a priority. And then person A said, oh, that's third, and person B said, oh, no, that's one. And I said, okay, why is it priority number 1 for you, and why is it priority number 3 for you? And that's how you create that sense of understanding where you're at your roadmap, why you selected the features that you've selected, and you're moving forward with that product, and then you showcase your roadmap, right? Every quarter, show your roadmap, telling, hey, we're here, this is what we achieved, now we're moving on to this, and have a quarterly grooming session with your stakeholders so that they are in line and understand why you've chosen the priorities that you have.
So, how do you differ between the user needs from the MVP all the way to the MLP?
So I think that I don't know how to answer this question, but I'm going to try my best. So the way that I did it was really functional. MVP is something that I can really bring out quickly to my alpha customers and get their feedback, right? So it's super functional, very focused, very specific on the problem. And then your customer base will tell you, hey, those features are not enough. I need A, B, and C. And that helps you develop the minimal marketable product because they're giving you you can ask them the question, what do you need to invest in this product? Is this enough or not? And one customer told me bluntly, this is too much manual work. Like, I want it to be automated. I don't want any human intervention. I was like, okay, thank you. I'm not there yet, but we'll get there. So he didn't buy it until 2 years down the line because it was too much human intervention, right? So you'll get, if you ask your customers, you'll get that blunt answer. And the same thing when you release it to market. Speak to your sales teams, right? Speak to the technical support people. They'll give you the insight that you need to continue to develop the features.
Awesome. All right, one more question. You have to answer it quickly, I'm sorry to say. How do you deal with building an MVP product that requires a lot of infrastructure work, especially if you're in a constrained production environment?
Get creative, like I did. Honestly, like I said, I'm going to release a report because we needed to build the whole cloud infrastructure. We needed to build the whole security. We needed to build the end-to-end data transfer point, right? So I said, you know what? I'm going to need a year to do this. Let me release a report because that's the easiest thing I can bring to the market. Get creative and also challenge your systems architect.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much again, Angelique, for sharing. Oh, yeah, that'll be helpful. Thank you. Just so you know,